Okay, I think people can hear me now. First of all, thank you so much for showing up. Okay, close to my mouth. Okay, I listen to my wife. Thank you very much for coming. We're going to be treated to a very fine program this afternoon. Dan Blazer has been trying to convince me that all of you are here, not because that Dan Blazer's reputation precedes him, but because of the topic. And I'm trying to convince him the other way around. Dan and his wife Cheryl have been residents here at the Forest at Duke for the last 20 months or so. He's the Gibbons Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at Duke University School of Medicine, where he also served as its dean. He received his MD degree from the University of Tennessee and a PhD from the University of North Carolina in epidemiology. He also was trained in psychiatric training at Duke. He's written widely in the field of epidemiology, has explored the effects of depression and substance abuse in elderly populations. He's a member of the National Academy of Medicine. He chaired the National Academy's Consensus Committee, which produced the report, Social Isolation and Loneliness in Older Adults, Opportunities for the Healthcare System in 2020. He was awarded the Distinguished Alumni Award from the University of North Carolina in 1989. He's been recognized for his seminal research in gerontology, and in 2014 he was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal of the Institute of Medicine. So, Dan, come on up.
I'm going to use this. Thank you very much, and I think all of you are here because this is a topic that you realize is important, and I hope to convince you it's even more important than you realize. Loneliness and social isolation is increasingly being recognized as an issue that older persons need to be concerned about, actually persons across the life cycle. We divided this into two portions. I'm going to talk a little bit about the science of social isolation, but specifically the science about loneliness. And then we're going to have a panel to talk about what you can do about it. So I'm going to concentrate on the first part. The panel will be talking more about the second. The reason for that is that we know a fair amount now about the science of social isolation and loneliness. We know relatively little about what the medical profession and professionals can do, which means this is a down-home issue that we here at the Forest have to deal with. We cannot expect an expert to come in and tell us what we need to do. Now, first off, this issue of loneliness has become increasingly important over the past 10 years or so in terms of the news. And one reason it's become important is that three events. One was the consensus report that Paul just mentioned that I was involved with the National Academies that came out in 2020. We made recommendations about what needed to be done. We tried to document what we know about loneliness and social isolation, and I think that's what I hope to present with you some today, just briefly. Following that, and I think in large part dependent upon that, the Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy, raised an advisory suggesting that loneliness was a huge problem health-wise in our country. And these advisories don't come just every day. They come when specific issues are targeted as being extremely important in terms of our health. But even prior to our report and prior to the Surgeon General, they've stood up a ministry for loneliness in the United Kingdom. Now, its success has been marginal, quite honestly, but nevertheless, it's there. And I think that's an important recognition. So a few definitions. I know many of you may not be able to see the slides. I hope to kind of get I'm just using these for props as much as anything else. Social isolation is simply not being around people. Limited contact with others. You may be unmarried or do not have a partner. You may be living alone. You may be in a rural area where you don't have contact with many people. Loneliness is a perception or a feeling that you are isolated and nobody seems to care about you and nobody cares about what you're saying. These two are related, obviously, because if you're isolated, you're more likely to be lonely, but they can exist separately. Individuals can choose to be socially isolated. They can be in distant, remote communities or even living by themselves, and that's exactly what their choice is. And so suggesting that these people are lonely would be a misnomer. In addition, individuals can be lonely when they have a lot of people around them. 75 years ago, a book was written by a sociologist named David Reisman and colleagues called The Lonely Crowd. And he made a point that I think is probably even more true today than was true then. The point he made was that we're increasingly becoming what he called an other-directed society. That is, our sense of who we are individually comes more from what we're told from outside than what we believe about ourselves. And we probably see this no more clearly than anywhere else than our use of social media. We're getting clues all the time about who we are, what our value is, who our friends are, etc., because we're getting all this feedback. And when that type of feedback gets cut off, especially I think in younger people, loneliness becomes an extremely difficult problem. There's another category I want to consider, and that is the category of solitude. And this is something I think every one of us craves at times. We just want to be alone. We want to enjoy time by ourselves. It may be an hour, it may be a day, it could be a week. And we just like to kind of collect our thoughts and be ourselves. And so that needs to be recognized as well. Now, what's the frequency of social isolation? Well, 25% of community-dwelling elders, 65 plus in one survey, that's about 7.7 million people, were socially isolated, and 4%, that is 1.3 million people, were severely socially isolated. 30% of adults in the U.S. feel lonely at least once a week, and 10% feel it almost all the time, that is every day. The frequency of loneliness in the U.S. is probably a little more common in younger people, that's teenagers, young adults, than it is in late life. It's least common in midlife. So we sort of have a U-shaped curve in terms of the frequency of how often loneliness is an issue. One thing that I think has been helpful is to recognize that we get out of relationships what we put into them. And there was a very well-known book written about 25 years ago called Bowling Alone. Robert Putnam is the author of that book. And he makes the point that we actually accumulate over time what he called social capital. That is that when we put effort and time into relationships, and I see people here all the time doing that, meeting with people, getting together with people, helping people, visiting people, etc., then we're accumulating what he calls social capital, and that capital can be used later when we need that input ourselves. And so we give and we can take. The point he makes in Bowling Alone is that the ability to accumulate social capital and the reality of us doing that has decreased remarkably over the past 25, 30 years. And the title of the book, Bowling Alone, is that we used to have bowling leagues. And now people will go bowling and they do it alone. And so I think he makes a very important point there in terms of what it is. Another thing that sort of goes along with that is the people that we feel close to, the people that we could have a close relationship with, that number is decreasing too. And there are good statistics on this suggesting that the number from over the last 20, 25 years has gone from over 3, like with 3 close individuals we can talk with, to now less than 2. So that's an important factor to keep in mind as well. So who is at risk for social loneliness? Well, I'm just going to go through, these are listed, and I'm not going to talk about them in any depth at all. The unmarried and widowed, males, people with low incomes, people with sensory impairment, such as hearing impairment especially, I think, cognitive impairment, people who have trouble interacting with people because they can't keep up with this conversation, physical health problems and functional impairment, individuals who are, quite honestly, in the health center, and caregivers. You may not think about caregivers being lonely, but they're spending so much of their time taking care of somebody who is ill that they don't have the time to develop relationships with others, especially, for example, if they're taking care of someone who has dementia. Now, it's very clear, and the evidence just keeps accumulating, that loneliness leads to health problems. We don't know exactly what the mechanisms are, probably stress, and that leads to biochemical changes in our brains and our bodies, and that in turn predisposes us to develop illnesses. But this has been demonstrated in studies time and again. In fact, some have suggested that loneliness almost equals smoking as a risk factor for poor health and premature mortality. If you're lonely, you have a 50% increase of developing dementia, according to one study. And poor social relationships increase in the frequency of individuals having coronary heart disease. Just today, I was sitting here getting prepared for this talk, and I got a call from a reporter who said, "Would you be willing to comment on a story?" And I said, "Sure." And we could do it in about 5 minutes. I looked it over. It's a story that relates a good study suggesting that individuals who are lonely, in fact, have an increased risk of stroke. And so these studies just keep coming. You'll see something every week, at least, suggesting that loneliness impacts our health. Now, how do we know that we're lonely? In other words, how do people even do the studies that I've just reported to you before in terms of who's lonely and who's not? Well, there's some pretty simple assessments. One is an old scale, the Berkman-Symes scale. Lisa Berkman was a good friend and colleague of mine years ago. In a typical week, these are questions you can ask. How many times do you talk on the telephone with family, friends, or neighbors? How often do you get together with family, friends, or relatives? How often do you attend church or religious services? How often do you attend meetings of clubs or organizations that you belong to? And you add into that marital status, you've got a pretty good measure, doesn't take much questioning, pretty good measure of how frequent we find social isolation with a given individual. Actually, Judy Vick is going to be handing out, I think she's already handed it out, these questions. Just the only thing she did not put on there was the actual citation, which is fine. But just remember, this is the Berkman-Symes scale. Or if you don't remember and you ever use it, then you can look it up. Or you can come to me and I will tell you about it. What about loneliness? It's even less difficult to measure loneliness. UCLA loneliness scale has been used over and over again. In fact, it was used in that stroke study that I just mentioned. How often do you feel that you lack companionship? You can hardly ever, some of the time or often. How often do you feel left out? Hardly ever, some of the time, often. How often do you feel isolated from others? Hardly ever, some of the time, often. 3 questions. And you can get a really good idea from these questions in terms of whether somebody is actually feeling lonely or not. And interestingly, most people, if not threatened, will actually answer these questions pretty honestly. Now, what can be done? So I'm going to talk about a couple of things that can be done, but I really want to leave this for the discussion because I think it's important for our discussion that we leave those. I'm trying to check my time here. I think we're okay for the time being. Okay, there's some indirect things that can be done, and hearing aids are an important thing. In our family, I want to say which member has just gotten some new hearing aids, and that individual was saying, I can't keep up with conversations. That's a new thing, okay? That's a new thing. So hearing aids can be quite helpful. They're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and that's why they sometimes stay on the shelf or they stay in the drawer beside the bed instead of in our ears. But nevertheless, they're getting better, they're getting much less expensive, and therefore we should take advantage of that. Getting out is a very important thing. And the thing that's been emphasized in the Gerontological Society or community is that we need age-friendly communities. Now, the forest is an age-friendly community. It could probably be more friendly, but it is an age-friendly community. So you can get out of your apartment, you can come out of your cottage, you can walk, you can go up and down visiting individuals, you can come to dinner, and you can sit at the community table, or you can sit with friends at another table. In other words, that's an opportunity that takes a little effort, but not a huge amount of effort in terms of getting that in. And that's important. And I think people who study the elderly have become increasingly interested in the need for age-friendly communities where people who are in late life can get out and be with the people who they know. Another thing that has come along is something we call social prescribing. And this is where the doctors, the social workers, the nurses, et cetera, can maybe play a role. And this is recognizing somebody who is lonely and then referring them to a group or some activity. Now, we use this term as a medical term or a healthcare term, and the value of that in healthcare is moderate but not extreme because quite honestly, people in healthcare don't know what the resources are. This is not something they think about. And so this is where we as a community can be much more effective in inviting people into groups and not worry about calling it something like social prescribing. But I do want to talk about one activity that I was especially impressed with. A good friend of mine was involved in this, Linda Freed, who is the Dean of Public Health at Columbia. She worked in a program called Experience Corps. They recruited older individuals, much like you, and they went into elementary schools. In these schools, they would work with younger kids. And they would send a sort of a team into a particular school to work with these kids. Now, that helped the kids in their academic advancement. But what was equally important is the teams that went into individual schools began to form relationships. And they would stick around afterwards, and they would talk to one another. So here's an example of an activity directed toward a service ends up being not only a service, but also an opportunity to increase one's social relations. Now, technology has become important, and I'm going to say just a word or two about this, but not much. There certainly Zoom, FaceTime, these types of technologies have made it so much easier for us to communicate with our families, if our families will ever do it. But it makes it much easier for our families to be involved. But there's a downside to this, and the downside is that these contacts are not human contacts. They're over the web, they're video contacts. We're seeing somebody in 2 dimensions for the most part. And even though we can carry on quite an interesting conversation, You really cannot get to know a person if you're just video conferencing with that individual. Now, if you know the person already and you do some video conferencing, that's certainly a better situation. But video conferencing alone is not going to solve these problems. But nevertheless, older people are becoming more skilled in using social media, video conferencing, etc. And this will probably be, on balance, a benefit. But I think we've got to remember that it's probably not enough. One other comment about this is that one thing that kept many older persons from engaging in these types of activities was that they were not skilled in technologies. Now, we're making much progress in this, and touch screens, et cetera, can lead to a lot of advances in this area that we don't have at this particular point in time. Now, another thing that's coming along is what they call social robots. And this is probably not all that relevant, but I just thought it was cute, and so I'll tell you about it. This is Paho. Okay, Paho is a harp seal replica. He's a robot. Now, he doesn't just sit there. He moves around. He's plugged in. He moves around. He kind of cuddles with you. He asks for you to rub him, etc. And for individuals who have cognitive impairment, this has actually been used and is somewhat successful. But again, the issue is it does not replace true human contact as we go along. And there are ethical considerations here too. In other words, it's sort of like we want to just put our need to interact with people onto a machine or a screen or something like that. And that hopefully will keep them involved and active. And because of that, they are just not, we don't feel like we have to interact with them ourselves. And so we have to be very careful with these technologies, Paho being one of them, that we have to consider. I want to move down to some of the conclusions, and I'm going to finish up here in just a second. All right, loneliness leads both to mental and physical health problems, depression, anxiety, cognitive problems, but in addition, cardiovascular disease, stroke, as I mentioned before, and I think the list of diseases that we find evidence for loneliness leading to an increased risk will increase. So we need to keep an eye on that. All of these things increase in older persons, even those in the health center for brief periods of time. And I mentioned specifically the health center because that's our opportunity, at least one of our opportunities here at the Forest, to help people who are in a significant position for having problems with loneliness, because you visited over there. If you visited over there, those rooms can be very isolating, even though they're wonderful, but they're isolating. And people often will stay in those rooms and they have virtually no contact with anybody except for their cell phone, if they can use the cell phone, and the television, and that's just not adequate. Human contact is extremely important. Now, finally, I put up here sort of the title of this thing, COVID changed everything but nothing. So no question that the increased interest in loneliness, especially in the last 4 years, comes from the fact that COVID isolated so many older persons. However, it was a problem before, and it's going to continue to be a problem. It only brought the problem to light. And as society opened up, then that problem can easily be pressed down again and not seen to be important. So we have to recognize that we have a long-term issue that we owe to ourselves to try to work on, if we're an age-friendly community, to try to overcome some of the issues of social isolation and loneliness in our society. So what I want to do now is ask our panel to come up, and I'll introduce them once they get up here. Give us a few minutes. We don't move as fast as we once did. Or I don't move as fast as I once did. I'm going to maybe move over here, but I'll move out of the way here. Sit. I just want to be sure I can see everybody. So what we're going to do is have our group here talk a little bit about some specific issues related to loneliness and social isolation, as they are members of the Health Center volunteers. In addition to that, we'll give plenty of time for you to raise questions, ask questions, make comments. Because, again, I think to me this is an extremely important topic. So we'll start out with, starting out with Elodie Bentley, and she'll make some comments, and we'll go from there.
Can you hear me? Good. As Dan has pointed out to us so completely, that loneliness has become pandemic in our world. COVID, aided and abetted by social media, has increased isolation in every age group, including ours. And while the folks in the health center experience it, they're not the only ones. When I first moved here, a good friend who had made the move to a CCRC years before said to me, one morning you're going to get up, and the boxes are going to be mostly unpacked, your family's going to go home, and you are going to think, what the hell have I done? And she was right about that. That's exactly what happened. But she had advice for me. She said, get up, get a cup of coffee, check the news, see how things are, then get dressed and get out of that apartment. Go find out what's going on and be a part of it. She had seen enough to know that many of us are a bit traumatized by the move and that loneliness can follow. She was pointing out to me a way of avoiding that by getting involved early on. Recognition of loneliness is important, and it's a first step to improving our situation and moving on from it. This community is known for its friendliness. Our captain's table is a godsend to many new people and to many of us who have been here as well. We do support one another, sharing when we think we can help someone who's going through an experience that we ourselves have experienced. And being of help to others helps us by helping us continue to give to our community.
Next is Nancy Miller.
I'm going to read Apologies. Loneliness, a case study. My husband, N. Richard Miller, was admitted twice from Duke Hospital to skilled nursing care at TFAD. During his first stay and for part of the second, he was treated in the original health and wellness venue, which was connected to our independent living building. For his remaining 8 months, he was cared for in the new health center, which was no longer connected to the main building, thus eliminating the possibility that he could travel from building to building using his motorized Jazzy. For him, this represented a great loss of independence. Dick was among the first occupants of the new building and was invited to choose his own room. At that time, future residents assigned to his small house were unknown. Therefore, he made his room choice guided by the real estate motto, location, location, location. The room he selected was one he felt was the lightest, brightest, quietest, plus it offered privacy. Unfortunately, upon moving in, his corridor was not fully occupied, and his location at the end of a hallway was very isolated. Nearby residents had very different care requirements. Other than staff members, there were few passers-by who might pop in to say hello. The very promising Staying Connected program was not fully off the ground, and the activities staff was just getting organized. Most days, Dick and I ate 2 meals together in either his small house or in his room. Sometimes we had picnics for 2, with special treats such as hard-shell crabs eaten outside on the 4th floor terrace. About once a week, when he was able, we took the shuttle to enjoy a program in the auditorium or share dinner with friends in Rosewood. After a few weeks in the new building, my husband began to express his feelings of isolation and loneliness, which was atypical of him. I've been asked to share with you how we address the situation. Many of you with enormous empathy made your presence felt. For example, one friend reminded Dick of his membership on both the Finance and Health committees and escorted him to the meetings using the shuttle. Another friend visited once a week, bringing his own lunch to dine with Dick at the health center, where the 2 men solved current world problems. This same friend brought along a new resident periodically whom Dick had not yet met. Yet another friend volunteered to be Dick's scribe. She diligently transcribed stories representing his many interests and adventures, and very quickly returned with copies ready to be edited, often edited, in fact, more than once. While this gave Dick an enormous pleasure, our dedicated scribe always made him believe that it was she who was having a good time. At our request, the activity staff collaborated with us to gather once a month a group residing in the health center to enjoy Coke floats and conversations together. However, with the assistance of Nathan Summers, our biggest success was when a group of health center residents enjoyed an armchair tour of the terrace construction site while sitting in front of a glass wall of windows. The superb guide for this tour was the head supervisor of Whiting Turner Construction Company. Not bad. Being ill is serious business, and we're fortunate to be in a CCRC that provides excellent medical care. Unfortunately, loneliness is often a reality while this care is being received. Dick is an engineer, took great pride in his ability to solve complex problems. Well, we're problem solvers too. Together, as friends, family, neighbors, professional staff, we can tackle this. I know this because you, the individuals mentioned and others not mentioned, did this for my husband. On behalf of the Miller family, we express our gratitude.
Yeah, Ralph Nelson.
How about, are we on now? Is it on now? I'll take the other one, okay. Thank you. One way or another, we will, I think I'm jinxed with respect to technical equipment. Loneliness is expressed in many words. When we feel others are not interacting with us, we speak, for example, of nostalgia, about a sort of happy social event we used to participate in, but we don't do now. We talk about missing someone, as when a spouse is away on a trip. We have longing to be with a friend. Or we say we are ignored, abandoned, drained, helpless, hopeless, or despairing when we fear that a social relationship is not going to be repaired. Sometimes we feel that others are acting against us, and we say we are marginalized, shamed, insulted, disrespected, or betrayed. Sometimes we isolate ourselves because we worry that we might be rejected. We think, I don't look right. I don't know what to ask them. I'm not interested or knowledgeable about what they're talking about. The move to the health center creates additional strains that lead to self-focus and loneliness. The shock of giving away many treasured items that won't fit in our new room. The pain of physical ailments and the confusion of having new doctors and new medications. The uncertainty and embarrassment about the status and progress of our physical and cognitive disabilities. The cultural gap between us and the people assigned to feed us, clean our apartment, and do medical checkups. We have little knowledge about their home situations, and they have little knowledge about our home situations. In addition to that, the call of other duties limits the time that they have to talk to us. So how do health center volunteers help the residents there? Unlike the residents' other daily contacts, we are in the same age range. We have experienced similar loneliness. We do have time to chat and to join with them in activities, and we can help them and maintain contact with the Forest at Duke's activities. Our committee's goal is to develop friends for health center residents so that all of us in the forest can enjoy personal chats and community activities. Thank you.
Next is Brenda Featherstone.
Good afternoon. I can hear me. I don't know if you can. I think I'm going to have to take my hearing aids out. I'm going to start by first telling you a little bit about myself. We came to the forest at Duke September the 22nd of 2022. And I made a conscious decision that I was going to be active in the group program of exercise and that I was going to volunteer at the health center because I'd had experience with both and I knew personally they benefited me. I decided to be in the health center and I found that my visits, I was actually getting more from them than I believe they were getting from me. And that felt a need for me, personally. In my role in Staying Connected team, I made a commitment to go into the health center at least once a week to see if there were new members on 3 South or if someone had gone back home. But I also liked exercise, as I said before, that was important to me. So I went on the exercise team on Fridays, and I would help one individual specifically with doing the exercise. And then I would help the activities team take them back so they could get to lunch in time. So I enjoyed that very much. It was a rewarding experience. Some residents were very surprised that somebody they didn't know would come and visit. And when I would do a one-on-one visit with someone, they always said, "Thank you so much for coming to visit." I could tell they appreciated my visit. In the Staying Connected notebook, it is located in the mailroom. I hope everybody knows this by now. In the Staying Connected book, there's information about the new admissions and also those in a permanent position of residents in the health center who might want to take a visitor and a volunteer visitor and what their interests are. So this is the Staying Connected book. Not only is this information here for you to see in the mailroom, it's also on our website. And I hope you all know how to get to the website. And if you don't know anything about that, I have some little printouts just to show you, and you can come up and see it afterwards. The other thing about the notebook and looking at it and the website is you just might find someone, your friend or neighbor, that's on that list that you weren't expecting to see. If you're interested in becoming a health center volunteer, you can attend an orientation that's given by Jennifer Key. She is the assistant manager, living manager, and she will give you some very vital information, such as if they call a code red, what's that mean? What if a resident falls and you're the only one around? So she also gives you orientation of the healthcare and takes you on a tour. It's very encouraged for those volunteers to visit at least once a month for an hour. If anyone in the audience is interested and is not already a health volunteer, please let one of the panelists know, and we will make sure you get that orientation. However, you do not have to take the orientation if you want to just visit a friend, or a neighbor, okay? The Health Center has their own calendar, and hopefully you've also seen this. This is also in the mailroom right next to the Stay in Connection book. Attending one or more of these activities gives you a chance to know more about the healthcare members there and also the residents. A copy of this activities is also found in the website. Again, I'll show you how to get there if you are interested. In summary, let's stay connected.
I want to thank all of our members of the panel. And now we have one final member of the panel, the non-speaking member, or at least that's what she describes herself as being. That's Judy Vick, who actually made this nice handout for us on No More Loneliness. It gives you a couple of ways to just quickly assess, either yourself or others, whether you might fall into this category, and then some activities in independent living and other ways that we can be support to the community. Paul and Judy are going to man the mics, woman the mics, as we open it up for discussion. So raise your hands if you have questions or comments. I cannot believe this group does not have comments, okay? So raise your hands and we'll get started. You're right one right here.
Will this program be available to the staff, the entire staff, as well as to us residents?
We had not planned that, but we could certainly make it available.
I can answer that. I spoke to Leanne yesterday and told her we were going to be having this, and she was going to try and come. And she said, we want that program in the health center. So I had not talked to you about that, but I told her, I said, I think Dan would probably do it for us. So yes, thank you for asking that question.
All right, someone else? Come on. Okay, that's better probably. Okay,
Any other comments?
surely. Yes, right here.
Hi. It's more a kind of question or a suggestion, whether there could be a workshop or a brief training session for people to help us understand how to best communicate with people with cognitive issues, because I think that might keep a lot of people from interacting for fear of how to, negotiate the differences in those conversations.
That's an excellent. Brenda can answer. Okay. Brenda?
Jennifer Key has an excellent video of how to talk to people who have cognitive problems. That is part of the orientation. And I guess if people don't want to take the orientation to do health, visiting, we could probably find a way to get it to you. But it's a very important. Yes, exactly. You're right. But she has one, and it's excellent. It really is. And we've had other speakers talk about cognitive problems.
Okay, there's Judy over there. I know them others.
One of the, I'm like you, it's sometimes not as easy to talk to people as I would like, but they do have activities over there that you can go to with people. And you go with one person and you find that there are many other people there as well that you can talk to. So you have a nice, natural kind of flow of conversation when you do it that way. And I have just, it has worked out so well for me to do it that way.
Is this on? Okay. My husband is a resident over at the health center, and we're fairly new. Well, we moved here from out of state, so neither one of us. My husband is a resident at the health center, and both of us moved here from out of state without knowing anyone. And I have been delighted in meeting all of you. And one of the things that I'm aware of at the health center that might be helpful, there are many activities that go on, but often people have to go up to the 5th floor. And people are wanting things happening right on in their neighborhood. And one of the things where my husband is on the 2nd floor, people love to play games. And so if there's any of you who are interested in like playing checkers with someone or whatever the person might be interested in, I think that could be very helpful. This way, they don't have to just everyone go up at the same time for a game. But I really do think the people would like that.
Excellent comment. Who else? Judy over here. I know.
So this is actually for the independent living. So many of us, even with hearing aids, have some hearing deficiency, and we love to talk. And so the dining room frequently is very difficult to hear one another. I don't know if anything can be done to improve the soundproofing in that room, but that would be such a help if it could.
That's an excellent suggestion.
I have a suggestion for the people who haven't been to the health center or planning to visit someone at the health center. If you feel uncomfortable how to, have a conversation, it's good to have a seasoned volunteer who goes there regularly, somebody like Brenda, like Ralph, like Elodie. You can call them and just be with them, and you will see how the visiting goes, the kinds of conversation they have, and it's very helpful.
Good. You. Well, I think Judy has another comment there. Okay.
This is really a suggestion that I hope via this gets back to the health center. I've made it to the health center, but it doesn't seem to help. It's very hard to find rooms because when you get up to the floor, they have the names of the areas, but if you know someone's in 309, it doesn't help to see a sign that says, Magnolia South or something. So Paul and I went to visit, we first went the wrong way. We had no idea, noticed those rooms were the wrong way, went around. So putting numbers under the, this number to this number is, this direction would be helpful, I think, for people to find people to visit.
Okay, we have a simple method for you. There are two wings over there, the south wing, which is near the lower road, and the north wing, which is near the upper road. The south wing has got the low numbers, all of which have got a 0 as the middle number, except for 10. And the higher numbers are on the north side. So, yeah. So 301 to 310 are on the south side, and 311 to 319 are on the north side. Oh.
Who else? Yes, right here. Okay.
This is this is a very selfish thing that I have done. I have gone over there to help in the art room because I'm interested in art, and I also met Katie Lewis, and she is a gem. So I spent Thursday mornings there. I sit with people, I help them draw, we get to know each other. Katie has taught me how to communicate with them. She is so good at that, to get down at their level, and I've had a great experience there. But I go to that one place and do that one thing, and sometimes she needs help going to the rooms and bringing people to that room. But anyway, it's selfish, and I go and I like it.
I'll make a response to that. I know that Katie, at present, is looking for someone who is interested in helping people in the art room, and that would be on Tuesday on the schedule, which is available in the mailroom. The art time is there, and also the time for playing games is on there several times a week. And so those are good times to go over. You're not committed to any specific person at that point. There are a number of people there, and you can come in and work in as you see best around there. Many of us who've been here for several years already know several people over there, and may have been a little reluctant to take the time to go over and see them, but you may run into them at one of those things. Is a good opportunity to get to know them and where they live and what they like to do.
It's not just have one more question, and then we're going to wrap it up, I think.
I was just going to say, it's not only Tuesday, Thursday as well. We need volunteers in the
Both Tuesday and Thursday are art days when Katie Lewis is there, and as was mentioned, she's good at helping new people with who they might talk with and what they might say. Thank you.
Okay, see,
And thank you
see
very
Ralph,
much.
if you would like to volunteer for the art, that's a good thing, and I think
I'd just like to
Dan would
make
make
one comment, and I'm sitting here observing. Do you realize in this question and answer session, you did not once ask a question about the facts about loneliness? All of your comments related to what can we do? And that's exactly where we should be at the Forest.
That's great. Just briefly, I just want to, I hope you picked up the flyer here and do your own self-evaluation, because loneliness is not just about the health center. There are people in our independent living who are just as lonely, and that's why we started here. But I did do your assessment, but I also did a list of an accounting, we call them factoids, I think, in our meeting, about the activities that are available for us as independent living residents. And you see there's 93 exercise classes. Did you know that? And exercise is probably one of the best ways to make friends, stay healthy, and not be lonely, and learn not to be lonely. And so all of these things are available to each one of us, and I hope you will get involved, because that's where you are going to learn to really know all of your friends at the Forest, and you're going to learn how we're not going to be lonely. Ralph put this title up here, No More Loneliness. We don't want you to be lonely. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you for our panel and for Dan. We appreciate you all.